welcome back to Crimson Glass on YouTube. Today it is part 5 of Discovering Fool Me Twice, which is my rewrite of General Hospital's 2017 story in which Jason returns and it's revealed that he and Drew are actually twins. We've already done 4 episodes for this process, so let me briefly review what we've done so you can see how they link together and how they guide me through the journey to beginning my first draft, which I hope to do in about 6 or 7 weeks towards the end of September. In episode 1, we talked about what am I writing, so which particular story am I rewriting, and then I asked myself why. Did the show mess it up, or maybe do I just have a different take on it? Maybe I just want to center it on a different character. In episode 2, we talked about who am I writing. So once you have your story idea, then you have to kind of make a list of the characters that you are going to follow. Who are your leads? Who's your POV? What journeys are you looking for? Who should be in the subplots? Who's main? Who's, so all those things. And what do all those characters bring to the table? What relationships, their history? You start to kind of form a lot of your ideas, because when you write soap operas, everything should come from history and from character once you have like your general conflict. In part 3, we moved on from the who into the how. So I took a look at my anchor scenes. I took a look at the structure of the story and what was going to be pushing it forward, what was the story that was going to be pushing forward the momentum to get me from page 1 to the last page of book 1, because this will be a trilogy. And then in part 4, we took a brief look at my last year's version of the draft, in which I kind of talked about where I had started the story timeline-wise and why it wasn't working and what were my 3 options and how did they weigh those options. So today we're going to check in and see how that's going. Now that I know that I have to start the story when Jason returns to Port Charles, where do I go from there? Do I simply just sit down and start writing? Some people would. For me, I'm a planner. I kind of like to know where I'm looking and what I'm dealing with. So I sat down in a document and I made a list first of my 3 acts. I just wrote out Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Act 1 is generally your setup, where you kind of you present your world, your characters, you set out the situation. In Act 2, you raise the stakes. Everything gets a little bit more complicated. Characters start making choices. And in Act 3, you resolve the conflict, or, you resolve the conflict for that particular book. Because obviously, as I said, this is a trilogy. So as a trilogy, you have a larger story that is going to go throughout the 3 books. And then you have stories that push that forward, that you push it forward. So book 1, I have to kind of give you a satisfying resolution that both allows me to wrap up a conflict for the book for the overall memory swap, as well as giving you a hook to turn into the next book. So I did that. I set up and I just wrote out Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then I just wrote out what the scenes were going to be, the anchor scenes. So you have 2 anchor scenes in Act 2. I'm sorry, you have 2 anchor scenes in Act 1, you have 2 scenes in Act 2, and then you have the final 3 scenes in Act 3. And then from there, I obviously wrote out what those scenes were going to be. And then what I did was I took the 3 main storylines that I have, because in a traditional novel, you generally would only have one central narrative conflict. Maybe sometimes in a romance novel, you'd have the main story plus the romance thread. A lot of the times, that's how my stories do work. Bittersweet had the Alcazar storyline, but underneath it was the Jason Elizabeth storyline. The Best Thing had the Jason and Sunny power play with the Jason Elizabeth romance underneath. In here, in this particular rewrite, it's going to be a lot harder for me to have one story and then do a romance subplot, although there will be a romance subplot because it's a soap opera. It became very clear very early on that I couldn't tell Jason and Drew's stories well without giving them separate journeys, and I covered that a lot in episode 3. So I have the memory swap, which is my trilogy storyline, and then I have Jason and Drew, who have their own separate storylines in book 1. I don't know now if they'll be separate in book 2, and we'll get there when we get there. So this week, I just really kind of figured out those particular stories. I figured out what the subplots were going to be. So my subplots are going to be the Elizabeth and Franco relationship, who are not going to be endgame. So if you've stumbled on this video and you don't know that I hate Franco with every fiber of my being, you should click away now, because this will not end well for you, because I'll just be ranting about Franco for like the next 3 years while I write this book. I'm not gonna lie. So it's also going to be Sunny and Carly and their relationship with Jason and Michael, and it's going to be the teens, Oscar, Trina, Joss, and Cam. I can't believe I almost forgot Cam. He's my favorite. He's my baby. I watched him grow up. And then maybe Emma. I don't know. We'll find out. That's definitely the teen scene plays into Jason and Drew storyline. So the really great thing about the subplots I've worked out for this particular story is they all feed into the Jason and Drew storyline, and obviously Jason and Drew feed into the memory swap. So all the stories kind of reinforce each other, which is going to make planning a lot more easy. So once I have my subplots listed out, what I do is I figure out for each anchor scene what's happening in each of those plots leading up to that anchor scene, and what's the fallout of that anchor scene. How does that anchor scene change those subplots and those strands, right? It's a way for me to organize the pace and momentum to make sure that things are happening at the right time in the story, that the pacing is working, and that you guys are just kind of interested. So I basically figured out the first half of Act 1 because I was finishing up another project this week and I didn't have a lot of time to spend with it. I'm gonna, after filming this, I'm gonna go work on it some more. So basically I know what's gonna happen in the memory swap, and I also know what's gonna happen in the Jason storyline. And because the Jason storyline helped me set up everything, it's actually gonna be a lot easier for me to finish up Act 1 later today. I'm actually really excited for the sections of story I wrote for Jason, because it kicks off a lot of stuff for Drew. It kicks off some really cool things that's going to happening with the rest of the subplots. Really cool stuff with AJ's murder, bringing that back, because of course Carly is going to be trying to make sure Jason doesn't confide in Ava by using Ava's past with Morgan, and Monica's not going to be really happy that Carly is pretending her shit doesn't stink, because it does stink a lot. Sorry, I digress. So that's kind of the plan for today, is just finishing out that. So my outlines tend to be very, very detailed. I move from outline to like what I call a plot sketch. I will write out the topics of a conversation. I will do scene level detail. So if I think of dialogue, I will write out the dialogue at that moment. And then after I have all 3 acts and I have like my large, like it might end up being about 15,000 words, I'm not gonna lie, I take that and I start making the chapter breakdowns, and I start figuring out if this has to happen at this point, what needs to, I start to kind of really figure out the flow of the story. Once I have the chapter breakdown, we'll go into soundtracking, and then I will actually start writing. So I actually do have a great deal. I gave myself 2 months of discovery for this because I really wanted to make sure that I was ready. Because one of the biggest problems I had with Broken Girl and Mad World, the last 2 novels I wrote, was I didn't give myself enough time with discovery. And that was another big problem with Fool Me Twice, is I didn't give myself enough time with discovery. I learned a lot about my process this last year, so I'm excited to really kind of put everything I've learned into writing a trilogy, writing a novel, and what really works for me into this next project. So I will check in with you guys after this video weekly. How is discovery going? Outlining, chapter breakdowning. Once we get into the alpha draft, I might not be checking in as often because I might not have a lot to say, and I don't know. We'll find out. All right, I will see you guys next week. Bye.